Myself, Dr. Raktim Mukherjee, Assistant Professor and Head of the Department, Shri P.M. Patel Institute of PG Studies and Research in Science, affiliated to Sardar Patel University, Anand. The title of my today's talk is Parkinson's disease. We shall begin the talk with a pictorial quiz. Earlier in the day, I just was asking about the name of boxers. Can someone tell me or identify the boxer that is shown in this particular slide?
Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali.
Who is that?
Yash.
Yash, you have nailed the point. The greatest boxer of all times, Muhammad Ali. Can you just tell me what was his original name? Actually, Muhammad Ali is the name he took after he embraced Islam. What was his original name? Cassius Marcellus Clay. Cassius Clay was his original name. And this slide depicts about his famous Rumble in the Jungle boxing of Ali with Joe Frazier. He protested during the Vietnam War, which US had, and as a mark of protest, Ali used to embrace the Olympic gold medal which he won. He threw the Olympic gold medal in the Ohio River and he embraced Islam as a protest. Later on, in 1996 Atlanta Olympics, the US government gave Muhammad Ali another honorary medal as a means of patch up, and that particular day everyone cried after seeing Muhammad Ali. Can you tell me the reason why everyone cried? He was the greatest boxer. In the last stage of his life, Muhammad Ali suffered from Parkinson's, and this is the reason I begin today's lecture with a slight bit of note on Muhammad Ali and his Parkinson's disease. He died in the year 2016 and one of the greatest boxer. His strategy was very simple. He used to come and say, I am the greatest, and psychologically the opponent was knocked off even before the match began. Okay. So Ali suffered from Parkinson's disease, our today's topic. So first we will introduce ourselves to the disease. It's the second most common neurodegenerative disease after Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's will follow in the next video. It approximately affects 1% of the population over 65 years of age.
Sir, you are not audible.
So Parkinson's disease is primarily a sporadic disease and aging is the principal risk factor. Only it happens when you age, and it's a multifactorial disorder with variable contribution. There are genetic susceptibility as well as environmental factors. We will discuss this. First, let's come to pathogenesis of Parkinson's disease. There are several mechanisms involved in disease, such as mitochondrial dysfunctions, and students, whatever I am depicting, each point, there are several hundreds and thousands of research papers based on each mechanism. So I have just summarized all those, not going into the detail. Mitochondrial dysfunction can be a basis for pathogenesis of Parkinson's. Oxidative stress or oxidative damage is another mechanism. Autophagic alterations can be a possibility, and proteasome impairment in protein aggregation. So, if the defective proteins are not broken down there will be protein aggregation, and that can also lead to pathogenesis of Parkinson's disease. What are some of the familial forms of Parkinson's disease? That it accounts 5 to 10% of all cases, and it's always associated with mutations in the Parkinson's genes or PARC genes. Now, what are these PARC genes? The PARC genes encode for proteins involved in the maintenance of protein homeostasis. Whenever the PARC genes are mutant, the maintenance of protein homeostasis is impaired. Once protein homeostasis gives away, then Parkinson's disease will result. Another important part is there should be a mitochondrial integrity. Mitochondrial integrity, whenever you study mitochondria under research, you have the outer membrane, the inner membrane and the intermembrane space. The proton flux, I think probably Sonal madam might have covered during your first semester, ATP, structure of ATP and the proton gradient in electron transport chain. So, mitochondrial integrity is very much necessary for this proton buildup or proton flux. In Parkinson's disease, the mitochondrial integrity is lost. Another important point is the release of neurotransmitter containing vesicles. Subtle neurochemistry or neurotransmitters are involved in Parkinson's disease. This is just a diagrammatic overview. When you have in peripheral system, we have RBCs and skeletal muscle, those are affected. The mitochondrial viability is decreased. There are metabolic changes such as cholesterol and free fatty acids in plasma increases. The TCA cycle intermediates decreases. Pyruvate increases. In neuropathological, as a neuropathological feature, the central nervous system, that is substantia nigra and associated brain area, these are the areas where you have dopaminergic neurons, and these dopaminergic neurons are affected because substantia nigra is a all these are neurodegenerative disease, Huntington's, Parkinson's as well as Alzheimer's. So, there is a neurodegeneration in the selective areas of the brain. Someone asks you an MCQ, which part of the brain? It is SNC, substantia nigra in Parkinson's. So, once the substantia nigra is affected, there is a decrease in the viability and neurotransmission, and this viability and neurotransmission is as a result of oxidized dopamine, which increases. There is an increase in calcium ions, and there is increase in free metals such as iron, copper, zinc and magnesium. Remember students, why metals are so important? We just discussed that oxidative stress is one of the basis for development of Parkinson's disease. Whenever we talk about oxidative stress, obviously antioxidant enzymes obviously come in our mind. Most antioxidant enzymes are metalloenzymes. Say for example, some of the examples if I give you. Which enzyme is this? Can someone tell me the full form? Anyone? Which is the next one? Yes, anyone? SOD? Superoxide dismutase. Superoxide dismutase, the metallocofactors are copper, zinc and manganese. Then GPX, selenium. catalase Fe or iron, and that is why the metals are very important. In Parkinson's, the metal concentration increases. In this entire figure, the increase and decrease arrows are specifically mentioned as a drop up or drop down. What are the major hallmarks of Parkinson's disease? One of the major hallmark of Parkinson's disease is accumulation of alpha synuclein. Alpha synuclein is the protein. So, you can always make a list in your notebook and study each disease which is the protein responsible. So, alpha synuclein containing aggregates, also called as Lewy bodies. Where are these bodies found? Lewy bodies or alpha synuclein, they are found in the neuronal pericardia and the process, and this is as a consequence of proteolytic deficit. If proteolytic deficit means the proteins are not degraded, and that is why there is an accumulation, and once it accumulates it will be microscopically visible, and that results in the classical accumulation of alpha synuclein aggregates, also called as Lewy bodies. The presence of Lewy bodies is one important observation or hallmark of Parkinson's disease. Now, what are the cardinal signs of Parkinson's disease? Some of the cardinal signs of Parkinson's disease include motor dysfunction such as resting tremor. Am I visible? Some of the cardinal signs: resting tremor, just now I explained, resting tremor, continuous movement, involuntary, even when the person is resting. Bradykinesia, slowness of movement, bradykinesia, right, it's slowness of movement. In the initial part of the lecture, I just discussed that everyone, there was not a single person in Atlanta Olympics inaugural edition who did not cry after seeing the greatest boxer of all time lighting the Olympic flame. No, a champion athlete, ace boxer, because of bradykinesia, he was taking some 2 to 5 minutes to just walk few meters to lit the Olympic flame. That is Parkinson's disease. Even if you are healthy, you simply have slowness of movement, that is Parkinson's disease, bradykinesia. The third important feature is rigidity and there is rigidity and postural upright. Disease. The person cannot stand straight or cannot stand straight. What is the pathophysiology of motor dysfunction? We talked about bradykinesia, we talked about rigidity of postural instability, resting tremor, and all these signs refer to the motor functions or muscles, the nerves which control the muscle. So, what are the pathophysiological basis for this motor dysfunction?
Sir, sound not clear.
Pathophysiology of motor dysfunction. There is a progressive loss of dopaminergic cells within the substantia nigra pars compacta, which is abbreviated as SNC. Mind you, its S and N are capital, that is substantia nigra C for compacta, substantia nigra pars compacta, and the symptoms become overt. Initially you won't get any symptom, but symptoms become prominent or symptoms become overt when approximately 80% of the striatal dopamine, that is dopaminergic neurons, are lost. Less dopaminergic neurons, less dopamine. So approximately 80% of the striatal dopamine or 50% of the nigral neurons are lost, substantial nigra. Only then the patient will show symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Before that, even if the patient progresses with Parkinson's disease, the symptoms won't be that prominent. So this is the beauty of pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease, that initially it's not that apparent. Only when the disease becomes full-fledged, it becomes apt or it is clear, when 80% of the striatal dopamine or 50% of the nigral neurons are lost. So the substantia nigra pars compacta sends dopaminergic projections to the corpus striatum. All these structures we will see. Both substantia nigra and striatum contribute to the basal ganglia circuitry. I have highlighted because these can be the popular MCQ type questions. The substantia nigra sends dopaminergic projection. So both substantia nigra and striatum contribute to the basal ganglia circuitry. There is a system of nuclei involved in the modulation of voluntary movement, and that voluntary movement modulation is lost in patients of Parkinson's disease. Otherwise, in normal patients or normal healthy individuals, the system of nuclei is involved in properly modifying or modulating the voluntary movement. The disease can also have non-motor symptoms, that is where the motor or muscle part is not involved. Let us see what are some of the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's. One is autonomic dysfunction. You know, an autonomic nervous system is not under your conscious control. There are sleep disturbances, depression, cognitive impairment, that is analytical, speaking, the cerebral skills, overall cognition, there is impairment. You cannot recognize. Slowly and gradually the person can go to a comatose condition. Initially it begins with cognitive impairment. So these are some of the non-motor symptoms that may develop because of Parkinson's. There are neurodegenerative process, and just like any other neurodegenerative disease, it's also a neurodegenerative disease, and this process, it not just limited to dopaminergic cells, it also involves other neurotransmitter system. Non-motor symptoms will always be ahead of the classical motor manifestation. So suppose non-motor symptom has started in 2021, I am just giving an example, then the other classical symptoms of Parkinson's disease would start some 2 to 3 years later, and that is why we say that non-motor symptoms often precede means before, it often precedes the onset of classical motor manifestation. So I would put it in other way, that classical motor manifestation is the full blown disease form, where the disease has already advanced at a much progress stage, whereas this non-motor symptoms, even if they are not a full blown disease, the presence of non-motor symptom can contribute to lower quality of life. Even if it is a non-motor symptom, the quality of life will be lower, because you know, any person having autonomic dysfunction, sleep disturbance, periodic depression, cognitive impairment is a big problem. The person cannot lead a normal healthy life, and that is why it contributes, this non-motor symptoms contribute considerably to lower the quality of life. Overall quality of life is lowered. Now we go to the very important section of our talk. Many questions and MCQs are asked from here. Pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease and the metabolic alterations. This is the second part of our today's talk. So, evaluation of metabolic changes associated with Parkinson's disease. First, it was evaluated in the brain, and after that in the peripheral fluids such as blood. What was the observation? The metabolic changes in both brain as well as peripheral fluid, they reflect alterations occurring at central level, or they can also represent biomarkers or ongoing pathology. So, if the disease is already in advanced stage or the disease is just at a rudimentary stage, at every stage the metabolic changes can represent the biomarkers, and these biomarkers can be a representative biomarkers for ongoing pathology. Using the biomarker, you can tell the staging of the disease, whether it is a early stage or whether it is advanced stage, and what is the pathology that is going on within the system, that can be identified by biomarkers. You talk about Parkinson's disease and dopaminergic neurons. There is a selective vulnerability. What is meant by selective vulnerability? What is selective vulnerability? Involves dopamine oxidation, calcium homeostasis, and both dopamine oxidation as well as calcium homeostasis are elevated in the substantia nigra of the animal in Parkinson's patient. Whereas in rodent model, the ions such as iron, manganese, copper, zinc, they are increased in the brain region associated with dopaminergic pathway. So, whenever you have a rodent model, experimentally it has been deduced that ions such as iron, manganese, copper and zinc, they are increased in the brain regions associated with dopaminergic pathway. Now, Parkinson's disease and dopaminergic neurons we will have slight bit, but before that let us understand the parts of the brain. So, let us understand some of the parts of the brain which are affected by Parkinson's. You have substantia nigra. This is the substantia nigra, this part. Then the caudate nucleus and the putamen. Caudate nucleus and putamen together forms the striatum of the brain. So, caudate nucleus and putamen forms the striatum of the brain, and these are also affected areas. So, selective vulnerability of dopaminergic neurons involve dopamine oxidation or impairment in calcium homeostasis. With both the substantia nigra pars compact of animal model and patients, it has been observed in substantia nigra pars compact of both animal model as well as in patients, both it is observed, both in animal models and patients. Now, again our topic is medical biochemistry, so we have to emphasize more on those areas where biochemistry is there. Again, the next slide is a bit of biochemistry. The Parkinson's disease and excitatory and inhibitory amino acids. You have taken the data from rodent model, that is and this data from rodent model, that is a rat or mouse, the rodent model implicates there is an imbalance in neurotransmission in the Parkinson's disease basal ganglia. There are neurotransmission differences. There are also changes in the striatal levels of excitatory amino acid, which is glutamate, and inhibitory amino acid, that is GABA. The drained battery, which suggests that Parkinson's disease and lipid metabolism, you have just like the drained battery, you have low levels of circulating fatty acid and cholesterol. So, low levels of circulating fatty acid and cholesterol is there, and both low level of circulating fatty acids and cholesterol will increase the risk of developing Parkinson's disease. Once the risk of developing Parkinson's disease is there, even the lipid metabolism is affected. What are the defects in energy metabolism in Parkinson's disease? First, we talked about the low levels of circulating fatty acid and cholesterol. Next, there are defects in energy metabolism in Parkinson's patients. First defect is there is a reduction in complex 1 activity from mitochondria. The mitochondrial complex 1, the activity is reduced. Which are the areas which are affected? You have SNC, substantia nigra pars compacta, the platelets are affected, the lymphocytes are affected, as well as the skeletal muscles are affected. They are all affected. Now, we will discuss Parkinson's disease and TCA cycle. Parkinson's disease and TCA cycle, I have just used arrows to explain you. When I say increase arrow, it means pyruvate increases. Decrease arrow suggests these components all decreases, that is citrate, acetate, succinate, malate. These components of the Parkinson's disease, the TCA cycle decreases, whereas pyruvate it increases. Pyruvate increases. What are the pharmacological treatment of Parkinson's disease? Now I come to the very important part of the lecture. The available pharmacological treatment is currently purely symptomatic. There are drugs, and these drugs can increase the brain dopaminergic activity. So, now we discuss the pharmacological treatments of Parkinson's disease. In Parkinson's disease, the pharmacological treatment is currently available and which is symptomatic. There are all drugs that we give to Parkinson's disease patient, the drugs are either precursors of dopamine or it can be inhibitors of dopamine metabolism, and there are dopamine receptor agonists. And there are drugs which increase the presynaptic release of dopamine. So, precursors of dopamine. Advantage, precursors of dopamine. When you give precursor, those precursors will undergo biochemical metabolism and it will produce dopamine. Inhibitors of dopamine metabolism. What we require, dopamine, whatever is produced, the dopamine should not be degraded. Dopamine should not be degraded. The metabolism of dopamine, how dopamine gets metabolized. You have L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine gets converted to L-dopa, levodopa. L-dopa is also called as levodopa. So, L-tyrosine is converted to levodopa, and levodopa under the influence of the enzyme dopa decarboxylase is converted to dopamine. This is converted to dopamine. We said that dopamine from periphery cannot cross the blood brain barrier. So, what would happen? You are not giving dopaminergic neurons, you are not giving dopamine, that person will die within few months, but you can delay the death by using alternative molecule such as L-dopa. You can use L-dopa. So, what L-dopa does, this is your blood brain barrier. L-dopa can cross the blood brain barrier, it can cross the blood brain barrier. So, once again let me recap: L-tyrosine to L-dopa, L-dopa to dopamine, enzyme is dopa decarboxylase. Dopamine cannot directly cross the blood brain barrier, so you have to exert caution in treating these patients. Though dopamine cannot cross blood brain barrier, L-dopa does cross blood brain barrier and it forms L-dopa. It becomes L-dopa, but this time L-dopa is in the L-dopa happens to be in the central nervous system or within the brain. This is in the periphery. What happens next? L-dopa again within the brain gets converted to dopamine. This dopamine binds to dopamine receptors, and once dopamine binds to dopamine receptors, then the neurotransmission becomes perfect and all effects of Parkinson's is gone. Now, what we discussed? We discussed the various category of drugs which will take care of this metabolism of dopamine or dopaminic pathway. So, why we are giving carbidopa? Let us understand. Carbidopa, what it does, carbidopa inhibits dopa decarboxylase. Why carbidopa decreases dopa decarboxylase? Because in peripheral tissues, dopa decarboxylase will lead to the breakdown of L-dopa into dopamine. What would happen? So, what was our idea? Our idea was that we have to replace dopamine in the neurons that are lost, or we have to use some precursor that will become dopamine in few steps, or you have to target the enzymes, those enzymes which are degrading dopamine, and those enzymes have to be blocked, and that is why the product won't be degraded. What next? We also talked about postural hypertension, arrhythmia and vomiting. Now, you also have another enzyme L-dopa under the influence of enzyme COMT. Okay. COMT enzyme converts L-dopa. This is carbonyl methyl transferase. It will convert L-dopa into 3-OMD. Okay. It will convert L-dopa into 3-OMD. Now, again peripheral dopa gets converted. Peripheral dopa gets converted to 3-OMD by enzyme COMT. Now, there are drugs which will inhibit this enzyme COMT. By inhibiting COMT enzyme, the L-dopa won't be converted to 3-OMD and Thus, you can exert some control on the dopaminergic pathway. So, there it is, that which are the two drugs? Entacapone and tolcapone. These drugs will block COMT, and by blocking COMT, it will prevent the conversion of L-DOPA into 3-OMD. So, one block. Now, here also there is a problem. This dopamine in brain, this is in brain, this part is in brain. Okay, this is in brain. In brain, what you want? We want dopamine to remain high. We don't want dopamine to be degraded or scarce. So, let us see which are the enzymes which are converting dopamine to other pathways. So, you have two separate enzymes. One is COMT, dopamine under the influence of COMT will convert, and another enzyme is MAOB, monoamine oxidase B. These are the two enzymes that act on dopamine, and under the influence of COMT, dopamine gets converted to 3-OMD, and the monoamine oxidase enzyme converts dopamine into DOPAC, that is DOPAC. So, these are the enzymes, and these enzymes are not advantageous to us because these enzymes will break down neuronal dopamine, and we are giving neuronal dopamine for treatment. So, this level should also be decreased. So, more and more dopamine will be available for the brain, and more dopamine is available, it can be a clear-cut cure for Parkinson's disease. So, which is the drug? There is a drug called as tolcapone. Tolcapone will inhibit COMT. Likewise, you have drug salicyline and rasagiline. These two drugs will inhibit the monoamine oxidase. By inhibiting monoamine oxidase, dopamine will get converted to DOPAC. These were some of the medical aspects. Now, another way is there. You can also use the dopamine receptor agonists, and these receptor agonists are pramipexole, you have ropinirole, you have bromocriptine, also used in breast cancer, and pergolide. These are the drugs which can act as dopamine receptors. First, we have L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine gets converted to L-DOPA, levodopa, and levodopa under the influence of DOPA decarboxylase gets converted to dopamine. All these we are talking in peripheral tissues, your muscle, all those are peripheral tissues, not in the brain. And but this dopamine in the peripheral tissue is useless. Why it is useless? This dopamine cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, so you cannot give dopamine as a medicine to treat Parkinson's disease. However, this molecule levodopa or L-DOPA, it can cross the blood-brain barrier. So, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and after reaching the brain, it gets converted to dopamine. L-DOPA gets dopamine, and dopamine then binds to the dopamine receptor and takes care of the Parkinson's disease. The problem is this enzyme DOPA decarboxylase, what it does, DOPA decarboxylase breaks levodopa into dopamine. In the peripheral tissue itself, if L-DOPA level drops down, then less L-DOPA will be transported to the original central nervous system. So, it is very much necessary that this levodopa should not be broken down. Okay, it should remain high. So, for that purpose we give another drug in combination, we give carbidopa. Carbidopa will inhibit dopa decarboxylase. Why we don't want dopamine? Another reason is that dopamine causes, in peripheral tissues, dopamine causes postural hypertension, arrhythmia and vomiting. What next? L-dopa can also be converted under the influence of enzyme COMT to 3-OMD, and the drug entacapone and tolcapone, this will inhibit this COMT. No COMT means L-dopa won't be converted to 3-OMD. More L-dopa is available, we are at advantage. Why we are at advantage? More L-dopa will cross the blood-brain barrier and your Parkinson's disease problem will be solved. Now we move further. Again, in the brain also, we don't want dopamine level to fall, but what happens in biochemistry? Under the influence of enzyme COMT and MAOB, monoamine oxidase B, dopamine is converted to 3-OMD, and here it gets converted to DOPAC, and therefore it is very much necessary that we don't allow dopamine to be further broken down, and to this end we use the drug tolcapone to block COMT, and we also use salicyline and rasagiline to block monoamine oxidase B. Apart from that, we can also use dopamine receptor agonists. Some of the agonists are, you have pramipexole, you have ropinirole, bromocriptine and pergolide. So that summarizes the entire biochemical metabolism of dopamine. Then you can, this is the main part of the chapter ends over here actually. Then you have non-dopaminergic drugs also, or anticholinergic drugs, such as amantadine. You have anticholinergic drugs such as trihexypheniramine or as well as benzatropine. These drugs will improve tremor. No? Just now I showed that the hands are trembling, so that tremors will be blocked by antagonizing the muscarinic acetylcholine receptors on the striatal interneurons. These are add-on drugs. What are the side effects of these drugs? These drugs cannot be used for extended duration. Why you cannot use for extended duration? Because these drugs will cause decrease in cognitive skills, as well as these drugs will increase the heart rate, and that is why these drugs are to be used in caution. In case of L-dopa treatment, patients who are treated with L-dopa, they should be continuously monitored by the physician before the treatment progresses. Now, what are the influence of treatment on metabolism and consequences for patients? Some of the neurosurgical interventions we study. One is deep brain stimulation. Here what we do, we place electrodes in the sensitive areas of the brain where Parkinson's disease, the substantia nigra, the basal ganglia, these are the areas, along with common surgical therapy. This is a very common one, and here this electrode therapy is extremely useful for patients with intractable tremor, those who are having excess tremor, and those patients who do not respond to the magic drug, that is L-dopa or the common drug. Then you have catabolism of dopamine to 3-O-methyl dopa, we already seen from the research paper, Journal of Clinical Neuroscience. This enzyme COMT converts 3-L-dopa to 3-OMD, we just saw, and this what happens, the homocysteine level will increase and methionine level will decrease, neurotransmitter alterations in Parkinson's disease. So, there is a influence of body weight gain and deep brain stimulation. Just now we talked about deep brain stimulation. The question is, why when you are giving deep brain stimulation, why it leads to weight gain? One is low, whenever you are giving brain stimulation, the energy expenses is lowered, more caloric gain, fewer motor complications are there, and the patient keeps on eating. They will binge for food. There is altered eating behavior, because that hypothalamic area of the brain which controls your feeding as well as sleeping, you will keep on eating and you will keep on sleeping. So obviously when you do these two things, your weight will increase. So that is what happens when patients are given deep brain stimulation. They will have compulsive eating as well as weight gain. They are observed with treatment of patients which are treatment with pramipexole, and this is attributed to excessive activation of mesolimbic pathway, and this mesolimbic pathway is the reward pathway. The brain gets a signal that you eat more and you will get reward, and that is how the patient keeps on eating because of the hyperactivation of this pathway. So this drug, one of the side effect along with deep brain stimulation is compulsive eating and weight gain. This is the diagrammatic view from your book. Anti-Parkinson's drugs, dopamine agonists, affects the mesolimbic pathway, leads to compulsive behavior such as eating, more appetite, more food intake means weight gain. Likewise, when you do deep brain stimulation, that also leads to more appetite and food intake. This is the summary of what I taught. Which are the areas? The nucleus accumbens and amygdala, these are the two areas, and ventral tegmental area, these are the areas which are affected, all in the mesolimbic pathway. Now weight gain leads to other metabolic disturbances such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, as well as atherosclerotic heart disease. What are some of the challenging areas of Parkinson's disease research? Some of the challenging areas are development of biomarkers, identification of metabolic changes in the brain, some of the biomarkers which you can detect from peripheral fluids. You have to identify metabolomic profile so that the disease can be identified early. It can be used to identify prognostic markers. You can anticipate the response to pharmacological treatment as well as the metabolites, which can be indicator of cellular physiology and homeostasis. So what are the optimization of therapeutic intervention? New possible pharmacological strategies, neuroprotection and motor dysfunction. There are encouraging results that has been obtained by adapting antagonists for adenosine as well as glutamate receptors. There are compounds that can increase the endogenous level of antioxidants, and when you use these agents, adenosine and glutamate receptors, in epilepsy we saw adenosine and glutamate receptors, these compounds can increase the endogenous level of antioxidant, and thus it can protect the brain and prevent neurodegeneration. So thank you very much for listening.